to another episode of FoundHer Rising, the show for women founders ready to step beyond one-to-one work and scale with strategy that actually creates results. I'm your host, Christine Hakkola, business coach and former psychotherapist. Today's guest is Carly Fleming, a registered psychotherapist with 20 plus years of experience who built and sold Everwell Counseling, a practice known for its intentional, client-centered care. Carly has experienced the kind of success most practice owners wish they had, designing supervision models, operational frameworks, and environments where clinicians truly thrive. Now she's taking that expertise into mental health tech as co-founder and CEO of Kindred Practice, building ethical AI-informed tools that make clinical work more sustainable. If you want a real look at what it takes to build, scale, and exit and evolve as a founder, you're in the right place. Welcome, Carly.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you on the show and dive into all the things that are going on and have
Mhm.
gone on in your world. I want to start with the business that you just recently sold, Everwell Counseling. Tell us a little bit about the beginning of that journey and how Everwell Counseling came to be.
All right, I will.
Mhm.
So I started Everwell in 2018, so 7 years ago. And at the time, I was a psychotherapist with a successful practice, solo practice, and had sort of started to notice that I was getting a lot of calls that I couldn't, that
Amazing.
this was not my area of expertise, or I had a full caseload. And so it was sort of a natural step to think, well, maybe I'll just bring on a couple of subcontractors, maybe one, maybe two, right?
I
And
think it's
so
no
I
big
set
deal.
up yeah, that's right. I set up a small group practice, bricks and mortar in person in Hamilton, Ontario. And that's sort of the beginning of the journey. It took some twists and some turns along the way. But that's how things started.
Yeah, I love that. And I love your story, firstly, because I know it fairly well, and I'm like excited for you to keep sharing it with our listeners. I think I want to touch on the point where your one-on-one practice was full, right? And
Hmm.
then you have this choice point that may or may
Hmm.
not have felt like a choice point for you, but it's a point where a lot of female founders, regardless of the service industry that they're in, get to where their caseload is full. They don't have any more hours in the week. They've hit a ceiling in terms of their income. What was it that had you to choose to bring on associates instead of do something else like groups or courses or programs or other
Right.
offerings? Why an associate practice?
Oh, good question. I was really clear that there had been some success in, like, the small marketing strategies that I had put in
Mhm.
place for myself, as well as that word of mouth that was starting to begin to like create some demand. I was just really aware that those things were successful,
Yeah.
and that I didn't really have to do much more in those areas if I just brought on a person or two to kind of fill the gaps that I could no longer.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel like a pivot, I think, is what I'm saying. Like,
Right.
it was just a continued evolution of what I had already put into place.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think at the time when I thought about, well, maybe this isn't what I should do, or like, is this smart, or what are my other options? I kind of thought, well, that would be stifling this thing that had been successful, and it had only been successful for a
Mm.
short time, right? Like I
Yeah.
said, these marketing strategies and sort of getting a name and a reputation would
Yeah.
have been like putting a lid on that unnecessarily. Um,
Right.
and so I just felt like I could continue doing that thing,
Yeah.
and I could just like spread the wealth, so to speak, and have those
Yeah.
referrals go to other good clinicians that I respected and I wanted to work with.
Yeah. I think that makes so much sense. Like you didn't say this phrase, but I'll say it and we'll see how it lands. It's almost like it seemed like the path of least resistance.
Yep, that's right. That's
Yeah.
exactly what
Yeah.
it felt like. Exactly.
Yeah, and sometimes I see business owners like start to come up with these great ideas, right? To tap into their creativity, but then they try them and they flop, and that can happen for a variety of reasons. But
Hmm.
one of it one of them is what you said, that when we try to reinvent the wheel too much or we go too far left of center from what's already working, that can actually be our demise. And it sounds like whether you did this consciously or not, you saw what was working and considered what is the easiest way to keep building on what's already working and what I'm already doing to increase my success, become more profitable, reach more people.
That is exactly it. Thank you for framing it that way.
Of
And I think that
course.
is what I continued to do. Like, that
Yeah.
early lesson, what is actually like a pretty good, model for how I
Yeah.
continued to work then in the next few years.
Yeah. See, I mean, you
Yeah.
make that whole part sound easy, and I know there was challenges to it, but
Mhm.
specifically once you started building the associate practice, what were some of the biggest and maybe unexpected challenges you came up against?
Mhm. When I first started that practice in, in bricks and mortar in the space, I really wasn't sure. I kind of was. I wanted to tick all the boxes, and
Yeah.
so I took over a space that had also had a massage therapist and also had a acupuncturist, and I was like, "Oh, sure, you can keep renting a room, and yeah, why don't you keep doing your thing, and I'll do
Mm,
my thing," and what I learned very quickly was that lack of focus and that lack of specificity
yeah.
had me, serving many masters, like trying so hard to make it all work and keep everyone happy. So
Hmm.
those early days were trying to keep all these different people with different intentions and goals happy and
Yeah.
not really focusing on my own strategy or what I wanted to keep me happy, right? And
Yeah.
so I learned very quickly that to focus in and to have specificity around what the services I wanted to offer and the people I wanted to work with was the
Hmm.
key. Now, for
Hmm.
me, COVID hit, right? So it would then be then now so now it's 2020. I'm still trying to keep all these different people happy while off to the side being like, I have a vision, but it might not make you happy over here. So I'll just kind of quietly
Oh
build
my
it.
gosh. Yes.
And then COVID hit, which was like the great clarifier for many people. I
Yeah.
mean, many other things too, but
Yeah.
and actually that's when I met you, and that's when we started working together. You started working with me as my business coach, and it just became very clear I had to have a plan and start working towards that plan,
Yeah.
and that's when it became so much easier for me
Yeah.
to be clear and to scale and then bring on new associates and to do it all still within that lane that I talked about earlier. Like do
Yeah.
it, have the goal and the specificity that was
Yeah.
required to
Yeah.
to grow.
I so appreciate you sharing all of that and sharing it so candidly. I would suggest, based on, the experiences I've had and the number of women founders that I've spoken to, that what you describe around, you know, I see it in a certain way as just being really easygoing, right? And not wanting to make waves, but there's also an element of people pleasing in there where
Hmm.
what I'm hearing from you is that early on, part of what got you stuck and kept you from growing is trying to be all things to all people, not wanting to say no, not wanting to hurt or upset people's feelings, and just trying to accommodate, accommodate, accommodate. And I see this all the time with women founders. It's one of the earlier sticking points that people hit, and it's oftentimes what leads to burnout, what leads to businesses collapsing, what leads to low profit margins, businesses even going into debt, and people ultimately just giving up because it's impossible. It's
Yes.
impossible. And it's one of the things that I think women in particular have working against us from the outset, because we are taught from so many different angles, from an early age, to be nice, right, to
That's
make other
right.
people happy, to be the giver. And for better or worse, it doesn't work in business. I
It
think you can
doesn't
have
work.
all of those elements, but without boundaries and without, like you said, knowing what our goal is, what
Hmm.
we want to focus on, it,
Hmm.
it's going to be our demise. And we've got to find a balance between all those positive, wonderful characteristics, which they
That's right.
actually can be, but also honoring our vision and saying no.
Uh, 100%, and I understand the gender dynamic of that so well. It
Mm.
that sort of this like I said before, this like I was kind of quietly off to the side going like, well, I have a vision, but I'm not feeling confident enough to state it.
Yeah.
And what I think happened after I became confident enough to state it and make decisions in line with that vision is actually people got happier around me. And like it
Oh,
sounds like my goal
like
wasn't that
shivers.
everyone else would be happy. My goal was I wanted to make these, I wanted to make these business decisions that were going to be, fruitful and successful for everyone.
Yeah.
But actually then because I knew where my boundaries were, I was able to like, create expectations for the people in the business, the associates, then eventually, employees, that they knew exactly what the deal
Oh
was.
my God.
They knew exactly what was expected of them. We had really pleasant and easygoing interactions. There was much less friction.
Yeah.
So even though I thought I was doing all the people pleasing, I wasn't. People were
Jeez.
unhappy.
That's amazing. That's so inspiring. I want to dig a little bit more into that, but actually I want to go back, so we don't miss a really important piece. What would you say? Because I'm imagining there's a lot of folks listening who are still feeling, to various degrees, like that pressure to people please, to be all things, that they can really resonate with what you're saying. But like, I have this vision, but I'm just building it quietly because I don't want to upset anybody.
Mhm.
What would you say was like the biggest thing that either gave you permission or helped you shift your mindset? Like what got you from that place of quietly building to really just, standing firm and going like, no, this is what I'm doing.
Okay, so I think there's two things that come to mind, and they're
Yeah.
very related. They are other women in this space it who went before me. So
Amazing.
firstly, actually, you as a business coach
Thank
being
you.
able to speak
Mhm.
to that and like carving out that space for me to say, you come here to this space and talk about your vision, and I'm going to amplify it, and I'm going to create, you helped with that a lot. And then also getting connected with other women who were a little bit ahead of me in the group practice space in
Yeah.
my specific profession, seeing what they were doing, and seeing that they were doing it unapologetically, and also had the respect of their peers and had the respect of the profession. Those were two really key things for
Yes,
me.
yes. So I'm going to call that community and cheerleading, right? Like
Yeah,
just knowing
yeah,
that you're not alone and also surrounding yourself with people who are going to reflect and not only reflect, but amplify the vision that you
right.
have.
That's right. Yeah.
So I want to go back to that piece that you said about your experience that, prior to that shift, you were doing all the things to try to make other people happy. And it sounds like I'm making a little bit of a leap here. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like it didn't actually work. It didn't actually
Yeah,
make everybody happy, at least about
very true.
yourself. And
Mhm.
then when you did the thing you were afraid of leading with your vision, putting in boundaries, saying no, taking risks that, you worried maybe would disappoint people and maybe did disappoint people,
Mhm.
you found that ultimately everybody was happier.
Yeah.
That sounds really counterintuitive.
That's
Tell
right.
me a
That's
little
right.
bit more about like how you think that worked or why you felt that was the case.
Well, I think you end up attracting people who resonate with the vision and resonate with the values when you're clear about your vision and your values. So
Yeah.
yes, sure, at that pivot point for me, there were people who may have been unhappy, like, wait, this isn't what I thought you were going to do. I'm out of here, and that ended up being fine. And like, there were no massive train wrecks associated with that.
No
But
casualties
then
involved.
now, yeah, then now I could be clear, right? When I was trying to bring on new associates or even new colleagues, to be honest, people I didn't know in the field, I'm clear about who I am and what I'm doing here, and what I see as like the way that our field can be, that can add value to clients' lives and to communities' lives and to the lives of people who work with me.
Mhm.
And then the right people, then, yeah, that sounds good. That's what I want, or that's how I see things. And the people who didn't
Yeah.
see it that way did other things. I think ultimately, I think that's probably what made the difference.
Yeah, I mean that makes so much sense to me, and it's going to sound obvious, but I'll say it just in case somebody needs to hear it. Like you can't please everyone, you can't be all
Hmm.
things to everyone. It's impossible. The person that's going to end up getting hurt the most with that mindset is yourself, is the person
That's
doing
right.
it. It reminds me, I had a life coach. Gosh, it must have been almost 20 years ago now, and I was going personally through a really really big change. And I remember articulating to her. We were sitting in a coffee shop one day, and I remember articulating to her that I was really really afraid of what the changes I was making for myself personally were going to do to the people in in my life, and I was afraid of the impact on my relationships. And she said to me, "Look, Christine, one of two things is going to happen when you change. Either the people around you are going to love that change and they're going to come along with you and your relationships are going to be better for it, or those people aren't going to like that change and they're going to quietly start to fall away."
Right.
And she was absolutely right. And I had a similar experience, on a personal level rather than professional, but my friendships got better, my relationships got better, and all the people that weren't really contributing to me and we weren't really benefiting each other went another direction.
That's right. And that was better for them in the end. Like
Yes.
everyone ends up finding the better path for them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Ugh,
Yeah.
I love this. So bring us forward in time a little bit to the point in time, if it was a point, maybe it was a bit more complicated than that, but when you started thinking about selling, what brought that about? What was going on for you?
Gosh. Okay. Good question. That might be a harder moment to identify.
Yeah, no problem. And
Um,
sometimes it's not a moment. It's only looking back, we realize something happened over a period of time.
right. Right. Well, I think that the sort of precipitating factor to thinking about selling actually
Mhm.
was when I personally decided to step back from doing the therapy work, but from being a therapist. So
Mm.
about 2.5 years ago now, I made the personal decision, and I will be just clear. That's the podcast for a different day. It was a decision that I made personally that I just wanted to take a break from being a therapist, and that kind of naturally led into focusing on the business. You know what
Mm.
I mean? Because that's
Yeah,
what I was going to do with
yeah,
the time that I was no longer seeing clients.
yeah.
And I think that was the point that I started to see things just more through the business lens and
Mhm.
less through the clinician lens. Obviously, I still want to hold very closely to being able to see things through the clinician lens. I don't think I ever could not. I was a therapist
Yeah.
for 20 years. But it was at that point that I was like, had the time to dig into the numbers, had the time to spend more, more time networking with people who weren't necessarily therapists. They weren't necessarily even practice owners, but like adjacent to therapy. And so I started building connections with just interesting people doing interesting work, and sort of began to see the world outside of this sort of clinical focus.
Hmm.
That I think was the kind of beginning of it. And ultimately, what happened is that in that networking and saying yes to invitations to talk to different people, and like, sure, I have time to, chat about this or that,
Yeah.
that I made connections that ultimately led to the person who bought the business expressing some interest in it.
Wow.
So I think it was less strategic than I want to sell and I'm going to put a 2.5 year plan together to get there, and
Hmm.
more, just a happy coincidence that
Yeah.
I got in the right conversations.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's sort of how it all kind of evolved.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I resonate. Like, a couple of things are coming up for me, Carly. Like, I resonate with the phrase "happy coincidence." And certainly sometimes that's what happens, and that's how things happen. There's this like synchronistic chain of events that we couldn't have anticipated that open up a pathway for us that we maybe weren't even looking for. And the other piece I want to point out, though, that is more intentional, regardless of how conscious you are about it. I was actually listening to a podcast this morning where they were talking about the difference between being an artist and a business owner, right? When you're the same person, right? And that you
Yeah.
can't actually do both, like all the way through. So the way that they were defining being an artist is, in our case, being a service provider, and in your case, being a therapist. And then obviously being a business owner is very different. And in the early stages of private practice, you have to be both. I remember back in my early days of my first company, I had this whole module on the two hats that you wear as a private practice owner and as an entrepreneur, and you have to wear both. But there comes a point in scaling where you really have to make a decision. You can't actually scale successfully and ultimately sell a business if you're wearing your artist hat all the time. And it sounds like there came a point in time where you decided to remove the artist hat. And I want to suggest that that's potentially what gave you the freedom to step fully into the business owner hat, which then led you on this fortuitous pathway to selling your business.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that resonates very, very much. And then just, yes, the necessity of wearing both hats. You're absolutely right. You must. And then the freedom that comes from being able to wear one after those
Oh
years
my
of wearing
gosh,
both
yes.
hats.
Yes.
That, oh, just like unleashes. And I'm sure for different people, it unleashes different things, but it's
Yes.
going to take off those sort of, the things that have been holding you back for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, you mentioned the freedom, and it also reminds me, like, one of the things I've experienced, and I'm curious if you experienced as well, that at that point when your business is scaled and it can technically run without you or almost without you, it's actually easier than the
Mhm.
startup phases. I don't know if you've heard the phrase, uh, running a seven-figure business is easier than running a five-figure business.
I've heard people say that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was that true for you?
Oh, absolutely. Like I think again, it was at this point. It was at the point of being able to take off one of the hats and be solely wearing one hat. And then you can, yes, that it definitely became easier.
Yeah.
Um, I think I think it makes sense. Like I think it just makes sense. If you imagine you're just doing two full-time jobs, as soon as
Yeah.
you drop one of those jobs, you're going to have an easier time of it. So yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good to hear, and I think really reassuring for some of our listeners, especially those that are in the early scaling stages, which we usually find around the low to mid six-figure mark, and sometimes the fear when we look up the ladder to the potential seven-figure mark is, oh gosh, it's so hard at this level, earning
Mm,
300,000 or 500,000. Like, how on earth is it going to be at seven figures? And,
mm,
assuming we're taking the right steps, we're hiring a team, we're putting those systems and processes into place, it's actually way easier at seven
It's a great
figures than it
point.
is at
It's a
300 or
great point.
500,000.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know the sale of your business is fairly recent, but I'm curious what you've experienced or discovered so far about some of the mindset shifts or identity shifts you've gone through having built this business. Like, I refer to my first business as like my first baby, came along before my first child did. What that was like for you selling it, and how you've had to kind of reconceptualize like who you are. I know this
Oh,
sounds like
wow.
very esoteric.
Well, that is a work in progress. I can tell you where I am, and I know it's not sort of the end of the road. I had the opportunity to talk about selling the business with the company who ultimately bought it for months before,
mhm.
many months
Yeah.
before the deal was actually done.
Mhm,
And that process, it was just invaluable. It was an invaluable process because
mhm,
I could have a conversation with them about what their vision was and how they thought this company could fit with their goals, and I could share with them, and then I could go away and I could
mm,
spend 3 weeks thinking about it and it really was this process. For me, I feel very fortunate that there wasn't a bunch of pressure put on by the buyer,
yeah,
to make a deal, to make a decision, to get going quickly,
yeah.
so that notion of the business as my baby, I understand it completely, and by the end, it was definitely not my baby anymore. I went through this
Mm,
process of being like, this isn't my baby. I have my babies, my real life children.
Yeah, yeah.
So I had this like longer period of time where I could
wow.
start to disconnect my identity from the business.
Yeah.
Um, I think ultimately, too, though, what is so essential, and not everyone who ends up selling a business has this benefit, but if ever they do have the option to make choices based on values, I had the chance to really um, do some due diligence. I put that in quotes on the values of the buyer. What were
Mm,
they really going to do once they got into the business, and how
yeah.
were they going to treat the people who worked with us, and how are they going to treat the clients? And there was like such good values alignment that,
Mm,
the parts of me that have to give up the control and say, I no longer get to say what you're going to do with it. Their values are aligned with the values and the decisions I would have made. So far, there hasn't been any moment of like, oh my God, I can't believe what they're doing to
What
my
did I do to my
baby.
business? Yeah.
you know but I
yeah.
do think that's important, because obviously you do, when you get to the point of thinking about selling, and once I had this opportunity, a couple other opportunities did come my way, so I had the chance to look at a couple of different ways of potentially selling it.
Mhm, mhm.
You look at numbers, and people, of course, you're going to talk about the value of the company on a dollar standpoint, from a dollar standpoint, and you're going to talk about contracts and all the like real like nitty gritty things, and those are really important.
Right.
But what needs to be at the table is the values and the alignment,
Yeah.
and that I probably undervalued at the time, not really knowing how. But now I'm on the other side of it. I would have taken a little less money so that I have that values alignment every time.
Yes, yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, and I resonate 100% with everything that you're saying. That was exactly my experience. I remember when I started the process of putting my previous business on the market, it was my first time doing anything like that. And I think I, maybe naively went in just assuming, well, whoever makes an offer, whoever makes the highest offer is who I'm going to sell to. And it didn't really occur to me until we were midway through the process how different all the prospective buyers were. And like you, I ultimately had the great fortune to be able to choose somebody who was not only values aligned, but who I felt was actually going to do a better job leading the company forward into the future than I was.
That, like, yes, absolutely, right? Like, this can become something even greater
Yes,
with this version of the ownership. What a
yes.
beautiful thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. I love that. So, one more thing about the selling of your business, and then I want to shift gears into what's going on now because it's very exciting.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, when you look back to what made for the successful sale of your business, what would you say are the top three things that somebody who's in the throes of growing their business right now and maybe with an eye to selling in the future should be focusing on to make sure that their business is exitable, it is sellable in the future?
Yeah, great question. I think number one, you've already touched on it. You know, to the extent that you're able to get the business to run without you,
Yes.
the more I was able to say to the buyer, yeah, that's taken care of by the admin assistant, or, oh, one of my subcontractors actually does that part of the work,
Yeah.
or I have this external company who does this. Like, as the more I could say that to them, I think the more attractive it became to them, because they
Yeah.
don't need me. They need all of these other people who can continue doing the
Right,
work.
right. Because
So
nobody
I think
wants to
that,
buy a business that depends on the owner, and then the
no,
owner's going away, and then
no,
what?
that's right. That's right. In my
Hmm.
case, I do have a small role still moving forward. I have a 2-year contract to still have some involvement with the company. That feels really right to me,
Yeah.
but not operationally. They didn't want me involved in all of the operations. And so I could just very easily say, yeah, that isn't me. I have these other
Hmm.
people who are wonderful and who do great work. And that I think was very appealing.
Right.
I think the other piece really is around numbers, to be honest.
Yeah.
Having sort of accounting and bookkeeping well organized so that
Hmm.
you can share it easily. For
Hmm.
me, that's I've worked with a bookkeeper and an accountant throughout the entire time, so it wasn't my organization
Yes.
that was there, I had all of that documentation so that I quite quickly could share things. That feels like
Right.
that felt really important,
Yeah.
as
Like the
opposed
last
to
thing you want to do is be scrambling to put together
that's right.
years and years of books, like in a way that's presentable to potential buyer. Like just
What that's it.
do that now. So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't have to go
that do
backwards.
that ongoing so that it's quite
Mm.
easy. And I guess along with that, it's sort of to be here is also understanding the numbers. So
Yeah.
because you're going to end up in conversations with people where they're going to be throwing around references and terminology, and it's really nice to be able to just be able to have those conversations. So
Yeah.
for me, that was about getting some leadership from the accountant that I had been working with, so that I
Hmm.
really understood what I was looking at when I was looking at
Yeah.
those numbers and
Yeah.
reports.
Yeah.
Um,
If I could just jump in,
yeah,
it reminds me, I've come across a number of cases where business owners, like even in multi 6 and 7 figure business, they're still mixing in their personal finances
yeah,
with
that's
their
right.
business, either in similar accounts or writing off a lot of personal expenses as business expenses. And or I've also experienced situations where people have multiple businesses and they'll do all the books together. And in
Right.
those cases, those are the hardest when it comes to thinking about selling and you're going, oh God, because I don't want to disclose all my personal finances or this other business. So really just thinking about those kinds of things ahead of time. And like you're saying, not only having clean books, but making sure the books are clean for that company.
Great point. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And it doesn't, by no means, I mean, in my case, it didn't have to be perfect. I
Right.
was able to say, oh, you know what? Actually, this thing needs to go here. But that was where I understood it enough
Yeah.
to be able to say, and that was fine. It wasn't
Yeah.
perfect. I don't think books ever can be, but
Right.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, and I think the last thing, it's maybe a bit more philosophical, but what I saw from potential buyers in terms of what was attractive was, again, I'll go back to the point I made earlier around the specificity of the business. You know, for as working in mental health, the company that bought my business was a mental health company. I was able to just say this is all under the umbrella of mental health. And
Yeah.
I sometimes see I've had conversations with people who are trying to do many things, right? Like they've got courses and they've got other disciplines under them, and they're doing some
Hmm.
things in person, they're doing some things virtual, and they've got one thing happening in one province and another thing happening in another. And I think what I saw, and those I'm sure are also successful saleable business, but what I saw was that buyers really liked the clear
Yeah.
intention of the business. You're meeting certain goals. You're in a certain lane. They can kind of easily say, yeah, that's who you
Yeah.
are, that's what
Yeah.
you are.
No, you're
Yeah.
spot on, Carly. A business is almost always more scalable and more saleable. Didn't do that rhyme on purpose. When you have one clear
Yeah,
focus, one clear offer, one audience, and ideally one channel where the primary,
that's right.
where is your primary focus for marketing and for client acquisition.
Yeah, I
It
would
sounds like
say
that's
that
what
that's
you
what I
have.
learned. Yeah,
Yeah.
I learned that was very attractive. Yeah.
Yes, it absolutely is, and that's
Hmm.
across industries. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
the moment I've been waiting for, Carly. What is on the docket now? Now that you've sold your business, what are you up to? I know you're not retiring.
No, that's right. Not retiring. That's not the
Tell us
plan.
about this business you're building right now.
Yeah, so I have thankfully have had some overlap with the group practice and the opportunity to start building a business in the tech space. So what I'm working on now is with a team of wonderful people who are and we are building emotionally intelligent AI,
Hmm.
meaning that we're entering into different forays of the AI world with the intention of making humans be able to do their human work even better, and supporting them to do so. And so I am now the new CEO of a company called Kindred Practice, and Kindred Practice is it's a practice management platform that is AI first, built for clinicians, actually built for practices like clinics to grow and scale and do all the things we've been talking
Oh,
about today,
fantastic.
using a very sort of clinician first and AI first framework. So we
That
are
is
early
so
days. We're going to
exciting.
be in the market in early 2026, and it's been an incredibly cool journey. And I am at the very first baby steps at the beginning of this journey,
Oh, that's
but
so exciting. Okay,
it's been really
I
fun.
said this was my last question, but I lied. This is my last question. This may be a little premature on the journey, but I'm going to ask it anyway. When you look forward 10, 15 years in the future, where you want Kindred Practice to be, where do you, now let me ask you this way. What do you imagine would be the single biggest impact that your new company will have on its users?
That's a great question. Thank you for giving, like, honestly, thanks for the chance to ask to answer
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Um, because this is the passion point, right? The passion point is making therapists' lives and businesses run so smoothly so that they can focus on the presence they need for their clients, the emotional labor that they need to do for their clients. These are things, presence and emotional work are not things that can be done by computers. But there is so much in the work that can be done by really good intentional tech. I want all of
Right.
that to help them so that they can like finish their day and go home and like not feel burnt out and be present in their
Mm.
lives. That's the
Amazing.
dream. That's the
Amazing.
dream.
Just linking this back to an earlier piece we were talking about, it makes me have this vision of your company taking over the business owner hat for these practitioners so
Great
that they
point.
can fully show up as the artist.
Great point.
I
Oof,
love that.
beautiful.
I love
I
that.
might borrow that.
Steal it away. Thank you so much, Carly. I am imagining there are listeners here who want to connect with you for all sorts of reasons, either selling your business or what's coming next and your new company. If people want to get in touch, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would love to connect with people in any of those spaces. So I think LinkedIn is probably the best
Yeah.
place that people can find me. And if you can link to that, that would be great. Or they can just search me, Carly Fleming, on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And thank you, listener, for tuning in to another episode of FoundHer Rising. If today's episode resonated with you, make sure to follow the show, share it with another founder, and leave a quick review. It helps more women find these conversations. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn or learn more about how I support women grow and scale service-based businesses at hucklehorizons.com. Until next time, keep rising and keep building the business that gives you freedom to live, lead, and create on your terms.